So year 11th, we're looking now at ecosystem diversity. Now, the ecosystems communities exist in, that is, the habitat that you can find a community in, they contain abiotic resources that the population needs to survive, as well as biotic resources too, the food and everything that they need to survive. The population diversity that we can see in different ecosystems comes about because of the differing resources. So the reason that you don't find particular species in different ecosystems is because the resources aren't present. You won't find an otter that needs a specific clam in an area where that clam isn't found. You won't find a tree that needs to be pollinated by a specific population of bees in any area where the bees aren't found. So the different resources that are available determine which species are going to be in an ecosystem. So the population diversity of an ecosystem is determined by the resources available. Now, whether a species will survive in a particular ecosystem depends on 4 factors. Interactions between organisms, which I've mentioned a few times now, so that's our biotic resources. There's also resource availability, so our abiotic resources, this is your water, our space, all of those sorts of things. Sunlight, temperature, brings us to climate, so floods and rain, dry, arid environments, that's going to affect things. And then lastly, our human activities. And this is a really critical thing. Where we're looking now at stability and ecosystem diversity is the number and abundance, the population size of species found in an area. Now, if we look at a particular example, rainforests, they have a higher degree of species richness than a desert. So we're talking there about greater population diversity than a desert will have. They also typically have a greater population of organisms. Now, this could be contrasted to grassland, which we've talked about in a few different classes so far. Grassland actually has very little species diversity, but it has incredibly high abundance of species, and particularly the population of producers present. And this is because of the amount of food available and the different competitive advantages that are presented there. The ecosystems that are extremely biodiverse are far more stable, and so they have the ability to recover more readily from those disasters than those with little diversity. If we continue that example of the grassland versus the rainforests, although they have incredibly high populations, that lack of population diversity in the grassland means that when there is some kind of disaster, so when there is land clearing for farming, then we have a big problem. The ecosystem isn't able to resist that. There are specific adaptations that these populations have developed in order to adapt to that environment. And when that environment changes, they move on. But the problem is that there isn't much space for them to move on to. They need those specific resources. And if they're surrounded by a forest and a desert, then there isn't grassland to go to. And so the resources that they require don't exist. Those populations become extinct, and we lose our diversity. So we have to be incredibly sensitive to the stability of an ecosystem when we are modifying it. And in the past 100 years particularly, when people have started to engineer our environments considerably, we haven't done so. We've got some checking of key terms in red there and some review questions which you'll need to complete all of those, but I really want to focus now for the next minute or two on our debate. So our debate is, the question for the debate is, decomposers should have their own trophic level. Now, as yet I haven't put a discussion page up. I will do so this afternoon. So we'll set one up for each group. Now you choose your side, either affirmative and negative, but you'll need to divide yourselves into groups of 3. In each group of 3, everyone will be a speaker at one point during the debate, and this will happen within the next week. This task will help teach you the importance of debate and discussion in the development of scientific theories in the face of opposing evidence. And this is covering a number of key concepts. Lastly, the task will be the focus of the remainder of this week and going into next week as well. So we'll have this debate towards the end of next week, week 2. You will have the remaining classes this week as well as next week to work on that. Again, last video for this topic. Please ask questions as you need to. Hopefully you found these activities useful, but we'll work on them as we go along.